and a very warm welcome to all the learners and viewers who are watching us in today's session. I am Dr. Geetika S. Johry, faculty at School of Vocational Education and Training, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Learners, today we are discussing the course on secretarial practice. I just want to also mention you that this course is also a part of the program which is being offered by IGNOU, that is Diploma in Modern Office Practice. If you recall, in our last session, we had covered the secretarial practice course, Block 1, Unit 1, which was the secretary. Today, we are going to discuss the next unit, which is on communication. And we will be discussing it mainly in two parts, Part 1 and Part 2. So, before beginning the session, let us first introduce you to the course on secretarial practice. Secretaries and office assistants, they play a very important and versatile role in the modern office environment. They are expected to have thorough knowledge of office management and procedures. They need to have excellent communication and organizational skills. Thus, the current business environment is demanding multi-talented secretaries and office assistants. Now, this course will teach the learners the basic nuances of office management that would help them to handle the practical situations in a smooth and effective manner. Offices, whether public, government, private or any other type, they require assistance and skills of manpower that are capable of handling multiple responsibilities. Thus, we can say that this course has been developed in providing a comprehensive outlook for the learners, enabling them to withstand the requirement of the job market. Now, just to reiterate once again, what are we going to cover? The secretary course, which we have already covered, communication we are going to discuss today, then office correspondence, reception and public relations, meetings, report writing, sources of information, travel arrangements and handling cash and bank transactions we will be taking up in our forthcoming sessions. So let's begin with communication, and today, as I said, we are going to do part 1 of it. So why are we studying communication and what are the main objectives of studying? What are we going to study primarily in communication? Here we are going to take up the meaning of the term communication, the various models of depicting communication, the various types of communication, the techniques and procedures for effective communication, and we will also try and understand the telephone etiquettes and manners. Now, why does one need to study communication? Communication is a fundamental aspect of being human as contrasted with other life forms. After food, water and air, we can say that communication is the most essential component of our lives. In fact, we spend almost half of our waking hours engaged in one or the other forms of communication, whether directly with the other people or with devices like phones or computers. Understanding and improving how we communicate with others is a basic life skill and may well determine how we fare in our personal, social or professional life. If we study the lives of successful people, we will find that most of them possess superior communication skills. So communication becomes more important as we rise higher in our career and take up on leadership and management roles. Top executives, spend most of their time communicating, and those who cannot communicate well reduce their chances of reaching at the top. On the other hand, we can say that pure communication can adversely affect an organization's operations and effectiveness, besides its image and its goodwill. Badly written messages will obscure the idea and the purpose of communication. Poor, inaccurate and inappropriate communication can also lead to legal problems for individuals as well as for the organizations. So we can say that better communication abilities help the individual and the organization to not only save time, but make the efforts more productive, reduce misunderstandings and help build a positive image and goodwill. Now let us try to understand the definition of communication. Till now we have tried to make you understand that why one needs to study communication. Now let us go on to study the definition of communication. Communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to make common or to share. We may define communication as the process of people exchanging thoughts, ideas, news, information and feelings with each other through a common system of symbols, signs or behavior. Communication includes writing and talking as well as non-verbal communication such as facial expressions, your body language, signs and behavior or gestures. Then there is visual communication, where we use text, images or pictures such as paintings, photography, video or film, and electronic communication, which is in the form of telephone calls, electronic mails, cable television, social media or satellite broadcasts. It may take place in the same location or across distance and time. Learners, let us also try to understand the definition of communication as a process. Now, communication is considered to be a process because it is dynamic, ongoing activity, a continuous exchange or a set of behaviors, not an unexchanging fixed product. It is not something which we can hold in our hands. It is an activity in which we participate, maybe as a sender, as a receiver, or as both. Then communication must involve a common system of understanding messages and interpreting their meaning. Understanding the meaning of another person's message does not occur unless two communicators can elicit similar meanings for words, phrases, and non-verbal codes. In real life, the message as understood by the receiver is rarely the same as intended by the sender. What is the reason? We can say that the main reason is that people have different interpretations for language, signs and symbols, body language and behavior, eye and hand movements, etc. Now let us study the communication models. The communication process, though, appears to be a very simple one, but it is actually quite complex, primarily because human beings are involved. Researchers have generated various models for depicting communication to enable an easier understanding of the entire communication process with its infinitely variable dimensions. Now, we begin with the earliest and the basic representation of communication, that is the linear model. And then we will move on to study the interactive as well as the transactional models, which factors both the elements of interactive feedback from the receiver and the context or the environment in which the communication takes place. So, what is the linear model? Communication in the most simple form takes place when one person, or it can be more than one person, as a sender encodes some sort of message and then conveys them over some channel to a receiver. Again, receiver can be one person or more than one person who decodes them. But we will cover as we study that this model can best represent communication through radio or TV broadcast. The early communication model, was developed by telecommunication engineers who viewed communication as a transmission of a coded message over a telegraph line. Now let us try and understand the basic elements of the linear model. First is the source. A source of communication is the initiator and developer of a message which can be a thought, it can be an idea, or it can be a feeling. The source could be an individual, it can be a group or an organization. The source prepares the message and then puts into a code that can be understood by the intended receiver. Second element is the message. Message is the written, spoken and unspoken form of the core idea, thought or feeling that one person, that is the source, wishes to communicate to another person or group of people, that is the receiver. The message is the content of the interaction. The objective of the message could either be to inform, to persuade, to mobilize, or motivate the receiver in taking a particular course of action. The third element is encoding. After the sender has prepared the message, he must decide how best to convey the message to the receiver. Encoding is the process of translating a message into the form, whether speech or writing, in which it will be communicated. Because senders encode messages before communicating them, and they are often termed as or referred as the encoder. For example, when a boss finds it necessary to reprimand an employee, he or she should think how to encode the message. They have to understand how they have to encode the message. So what are the type of words should be used, whether they should be using mild words or they should be using firm words. What is the volume that they should use, whether they have to be very loud or they have to be soft. Is there any repetition of the reprimand required, or should it be done in front of the other staff, or should it be done privately? Should a written memo follow this reprimand? What specific examples would help the employee understand? So all these things, they come into the mind, when you are encoding the message. Next element is the channel. A channel is the pathway or medium which is selected to carry the message between the sender and the receiver. Now, the selection of the particular channel by the sender may in many cases decide the success of the communication process. Now, with today's technological advances, we receive messages from a variety of channels. Now, the examples of the communication channels are, they are face-to-face discussions, then there are telephone calls which can be between person to person or a conference call, then it can be through handwritten or typed letter, it can be through electronic medium like email, fax, text messages, instant messengers, Twitter accounts, video conferencing, then there are blogs, there is newsletters, there is magazines, there is radio and television, etc. So each channel has its own set of unique characteristics, and the sender, they have to decide, depending upon the nature and the importance of the message, the most appropriate set, one or several of available communication channels. The sender also has to decide upon the channel order, should he first write and then call, or first he should make a call and then send the written messages. Now, when the sender is selecting a channel, there are certain factors that influence the selection of a channel. So let us now discuss what are the factors that influence the selection of a channel. First is the importance of the message. Now, for transmitting a very important and vital message, oral face-to-face channel is usually the most preferred, as it provides instantaneous feedback. The sender then has an option for repeating, clarifying, modifying the message to ensure that the message has been properly understood and any resistance or reluctance from the receiver being overcome. The next is the necessity of a permanent record. Now, we can say that written instructions, memos and emails, can be used to verify a conversation and serve as a permanent record of the message. So, it is very important in case the receiver of the message has to be held accountable for the information instructions contained in the message. The next is the cost of the channel. Now, different channels incur different costs depending upon the usage duration and the location of the communicators. The number of communicators will also determine the total cost incurred. Then the next factor is the audience. Now, the composition of the set of receivers is important in deciding the channel. They have to be spread out at different locations, they may be operating in different time zones and so on. Thus, a written communication can be seen as a viable medium. Now, the next element is decoding. Now, decoding is the process wherein the receiver goes through trying to interpret the exact meaning of a message. While interpreting the message, the receiver will utilize his own vocabulary and sense of meaning. So, it is vital that both the sender and the receiver, they share a common interpretation base so as to prevent any kind of distortion of the message. Hence, the main onus to ensure this completely lies on the sender. So, we can say that whatever the sender is sending, whatever the message the sender is trying to send, or whatever channel of communication he is trying to send through, he has to see that it can be prevented from any kind of distortion. Then receiver or the intended audience. This is the next element. The receiver of the communication is the person who decodes the message and attempts to make sense of the message. The receiver could be an individual, it could be a small or it could be a very large group. The receiver or receivers could be sitting next to the source or be far off, at a very scattered location. So, the receiver could receive the message in real time, that is as it happens, or even after hours or days later. Because if he is sitting next door, so the message, can be received, just there and then. But at most of the time, it so happens that, even after hours or even days later, the receiver can receive the message. Then the next element is noise. Now, in the communication process, noise is any interference in the accurate transmission and reception of the message. Noise can occur at every stage in the communication process. Sometimes noise distorts a part of the message as it travels between the source and the receiver, and in extreme cases, noise may completely block its transmission or even alter the spirit and content of the entire message. So communicating messages accurately involves minimizing all types of noise. Now, we need to understand what are the different kind of noise or barriers to communication. First is the physical noise. So what are the examples of physical noise? Physical noise may include poor or noisy air conditioning, loud noise of machinery in factories or industries. Then there are phone calls which are ringing, there is shuffling of papers, then there is lot of movement of chairs around, in the room or somewhere else, then people talking, then there is lot of traffic and external sounds, distracting sights. So these all come under the category of physical noise. Then is the physiological noise. Now this type of noise involves biological factors in the receiver or the sender that interfere with accurate reception. Now what are the examples of physiological noise? The examples are visual impairments, there is hearing loss, there is illness, there is fatigue, there is articulation problems, and there is memory loss. Now another kind of barrier we can say is the psychological noise. Now this kind of noise refers to the mental interference in the communicators and include the socio-psychological and intercultural barriers. Examples of such would include biases and prejudices, preconceived ideas, wandering thoughts because of preoccupation with other problems. Then there is daydreaming, there is closed-mindedness, there is stereotyping others, short-tempered nature, personality, clashes between the communicators. So they are all examples, of we can say the psychological noise. Then comes the semantic noise. Semantic noise refers to the meaning of words and phrases in language used for transmitting messages. Semantic noise refers to cases when communicators have different meaning systems including language and dialectical differences, ambiguous words and phrases, misspellings and poor grammar, use of jargon or very complex technical terms. The intended message then is interpreted differently by the receiver when there is semantic kind of a barrier. Till now, learners, we have completed the first model, which is the linear model. Now let us come to the next model, which is the interactive model. Now the main flaw in the linear model depicts communication as a one-way process where the speakers only speak and never listen. Now to overcome this flaw, the interactive model came out where the receiver or the listeners were providing feedback to the sender or the speaker. So what is this interactive model? Now of course the interactive model uses the same elements as the basic linear model, which are the source, the message, encoding, channel, decoding, receiver and noise. But then it also adds two new elements, and these two new elements are feedback and context. Now the feedback is the response to a message and the context is the physical, historical and the psychological communication environment. Now we will now discuss these two elements of the interactive model, which are feedback and noise. Feedback is the receiver's verbal and non-verbal responses to the source's message. The receiver, by providing a feedback, turns the communication activity to an interactive one in which both the parties reciprocally affect or influence each other. Both send and receive messages simultaneously while consciously or unconsciously modifying the messages depending upon the responses of the other person. So it is a part of any kind of communication situation, we can say. Even no response or silence is feedback, in the same way as restless behavior or frowns and questioning looks from the intended audience. Good communication will actively solicit and encourage feedback by asking questions such as, do you have any doubts? Am I making myself clear? Should I repeat this point? In case of any doubt from the audience, he should be ready to further elaborate or rephrase the points. Senders should ensure that the information being transmitted is at the rate the receiver can handle comfortably without getting an information overload. Now, receivers also on their part can play a very proactive role in the entire communication process through comments such as, my understanding of your point is so and so, let me try to explain in my words, etc. The next element in this interactive model is context. Now, we consider another important component of the interactive communication process, that is environment, context and frame of reference in which the communication takes place. Now, by context, we mean the setting and environment in which the communication occurs. So, there are basically three important dimensions to the context in communication. First is time, then is place, and then is the occasion. Now, let us discuss each of them. The time context includes the time of the day and also the sequence and the timing of the communication. For example, we have to respond immediately to greetings or wishes. A delayed response may not be much better than no response. Similarly, conveying a non-critical message in the middle of the night will hardly achieve its intended purpose. It may even annoy the other person. Then comes the place context. The place context refers to the physical environment in which the communication takes place. It can be a private room, or it can be a public park, or it can be a religious place, etc. And it will decide whether one has to whisper or call out aloud besides the type of message which can be conveyed. Then the next is occasion context, because it has its own relevance while communicating. Now, learners, we may not talk of a party bash while attending a funeral. Similarly, we avoid discussing any kind of death or illness while attending a child's birthday party. So, we can say that each particular occasion puts restrictions on the type of our communication. Then is frame of reference, which refers to a particular set of belief, idea, assumption or experiences of an individual's background that affect how a person, may include either or both the sender and the receiver, understands or judges something. The same message may be interpreted differently because of the differences in educational background, the race, the language, culture, attitude and personality. See, we all know that whether it is a sender or the receiver, we all have a different background. We come from different educational background, we come from different languages, we have different cultures, we have different attitudes, we have different behaviors, we have different personalities. So how we perceive a message, so all depends on the time of reference. Now, after having understood the interactive model, the third kind of model which we are going to study is the transactional model. Now, the transactional model shows that the elements in communication are interdependent to each other. Each person in the communication process is both a speaker and a listener, and can be simultaneously sending and receiving messages. Now, let us try to understand what are the main features of the transactional model. Firstly, it is an ongoing and continuously changing process where the individual do not remain the same but keep changing as per the requirement. Each element exists in relation to the other elements. There is this interdependence where there can be no source without a receiver and no message without a source. Each person in the communication process reacts depending on various factors such as their background, their prior experience, their attitudes, their culture, their belief, their self-esteem or their confidence. The transactional model of communication takes into account noise as well as time factor into consideration, resulting in distortion of message. The transactional model contains ellipses that symbolizes that communication environment, that is how you interpret the data which is given to you. Where the ellipses meet is the most effective communication area because the communication interprets the message in the same way. So by ellipses we mean, many times you must have seen that there are three dots. So where, if we are showing the three dots where they meet, it is the most effective communication area because the communicators, they interpret the message in the same way, whether it is the sender or the receiver. So at this point of time, the message is which is communicated, it is interpreted in the same way. Now, an example of the transactional model can be seen by way of an interaction between an older student or a younger student. That is how they are directly influenced and shaped by each other's past experience, their culture and heredity. So finally, to conclude, we can say that in the linear model of communication, meaning is sent from one person to another. In the interactive model, meaning is achieved through feedback of a sender and the receiver. and in the transactional model, people build shared meanings. The transactional model also takes into account how greatly an interaction is influenced by the past experience. So, if we want to sum up, we can say that, or just to recall, we have covered part 1 of our session on communication, where we studied that why one needs to study communication, what is the definition of communication, and what are the different models of communication, that is the linear model, the interactive model, and the transactional model. Now, in our part 2 of the session, learners, we will be taking up the modes of communication, what are the techniques and procedures for effective communication, and what are the telephone etiquettes and manners. Hope you enjoyed today's session. In case you have any query, you may please write to us. Thank you.